another issue of Trump Reviews, the Grand Tournament cards. Got some good ones for you today, and some bad ones. Let's start with a bad one. Argent Watchman. This is a really cool idea for how to use an Inspire mechanic. I thought it was a very reasonable card for them to print, to have a card which was above the curve, can't attack, similar weakness to Ancient Watcher, so you could put like Inspire, this minion can attack, that would be great. In order to balance the card, you'd have to make it less good than Ancient Watcher, which is a 4/5, so, you know, anywhere between 2/3 or a 3/2 to a 4/5 was reasonable. I think splitting the difference would have made sense, so make it a 3/4. Unfortunately, Blizzard disagreed, thought that that would be too powerful, and they made it a 2/4. So the card sucks. As it turns out, the only benefit you get to the can't attack is +1 health, and that does not justify playing the card. Too slow in constructed by far. In Arena, it's slightly above trash, and by the way, when I talk about trash, I'm defining trash as like Ancient Watcher and like Angry Chicken. That's trash. Argent Watchman is almost trash, but not quite trash, because it's still a minion. You can use the hero power in Arena. That's 2 mana, 2/4. Okay. Oh, here's one more thing I wanted to say, really. I don't think it would be outrageous for a 2 mana, 2/4 vanilla card to exist. So the fact that this one has like can't attack on it is particularly atrocious, when it could have been an interesting card as a 2 mana, 3/4. So like I'm pretty sad. Next up, Spellslinger, 3 mana, 3/4. Stats are good. Battlecry, add a random spell card to each player's hand. The fact that this is a mirrored effect makes people think, okay, so it's just a spider tank with greater variance. But it turns out that Mage is the class which can actually take advantage of spell cards, because they have cards that reduce the cost of spells and Sorcerer's Apprentice. They have cards that benefit when you cast spells like Flamewaker. But the question is this card going to be good enough to put into the Flamewaker deck? At this point, we've seen most of the Mage cards revealed already, and it would make most sense to put this into a deck in which it was either fast, because then you can count on this as being like card advantage because the opponent will die before they can spend their card, or it's in a deck that will take advantage of spell cards like the existing Flamewaker deck right now, Tempo Mage also. That's the main question, whether or not this card is strong enough to put into Tempo Mage, which would be the home for this card. And that's kind of a tough question, because which card would you like give the axe to? Perhaps the Mirror Image, perhaps the Arcane Missiles. Maybe it finds a way into a 1-of in this slot. It's going to be fighting against the Idis Darkbane and Fiola Lightbane as other cards, which possibly could make it into a Flamewaker deck with more spells. But overall, Spellslinger looks to be a fair card. Potentially a 1-of or 2-of in specifically the Flamewaker deck. A fine card. In Arena, this card's going to be pretty good, just because Spider Tank is pretty good in Arena. So the mirror effect will basically be 2-no-one's advantage in Arena, unless you actually have a faster deck, in which case it'll be better for you because you'll get greater use of the card. I think the big thing to emphasize is, even though it's a mirrored effect, it does benefit one player more, and it's going to benefit the player who runs out of cards more, because the player who runs out of cards more cares more about getting more cards. Final conclusion about this card is it's really promising, and wouldn't be surprised to see 2 copies of it in Constructed, but also wouldn't be surprised to see 0 copies of it. We'll have to see how it works in practice, I think. Just kind of depends on whether or not the meta shifts enough such that existing Tempo Mage cards are outclassed by Spellslinger. We've got a Warlock card. Wow, there are too many good Warlock decks out there right now, so let's give Warlocks nothing. It's a card that Spellslinger will give you sometimes, and then you'll be really sad. So the immediate comparison to Demonfuse is Demon Fire. Demon Fire is a give a demon +2/+2 or do damage to a minion. And the fact that you can choose one or the other is really helpful for Demon Fire. So the cost, basically, for an additional +1/+1 has been deemed to be give your opponent a mana crystal. And that's basically the comparison of, do you want to play a banana to give your opponent a mana crystal? And the answer is no. I'm actually going to say this. This card is so bad, I have no idea why a card like this is being printed. Like, this is going to be almost a slight rant, but there's some cards which are so bad that they should not be printed. That's my opinion. Like, I think it's cool to make cards that, like, push people in a different direction, because there isn't really a Demon Tribe deck. If the currently existing decks are, like, strong, then you can push cards that push, like, a different variety of deck into play. And that's cool, because it allows for more deck innovation, it allows for different types of decks to rise. But this card, it's like, it's so egregiously bad that I have almost no words. Like, there were two ways that I could review the card. I could be like, okay, this card's bad, pass. But instead I'm going to take the route of, I believe in printing cards that are, sure, they can be weaker, or more preferably, I want cards to be printed which push, like, a different type of deck into playability, I guess. Like, this could have been a Druid card, for example, of give a beast plus cards, give your opponent a mana crystal, since Druids seem to have that give your opponent a mana crystal flavor also. I mean, Warlocks too, with Arcane Gold. Wait, that's not even a Warlock class card. But the point is, if you were to make a Druid card like this, and it were to target beasts, for example, that wouldn't buff Druids overall. And similarly, you can put this card in a Warlock and buffs demons, and that's good. But the problem is the +3/+3. Like, this card could be interesting if it were to give more. Like, a +4/+4. And then, like, you're actually kind of in the ballpark of what might be reasonable then, because it's a big enough jump from Demon Fire. It's like, oh, hey, it's 2 Demon Fires. Or, it's Kings, except it costs 2 less mana, and then it has this serious drawback. I mean, that's the simplest. There have been a lot of interesting ideas being thrown around too, like give a minion +3/+3 and turn it into a demon. That would have been pretty cool, and it fits into the concept of Demonfuse. But instead, we get a card which is so incredibly bad that I have almost no words other than, what were they thinking? In Arena, this card is really bad too. Argent Horserider. This is a card that actually isn't that bad. It looks bad on first glance, but I think this is a card that, you know, it's perfectly fine. Some people have commented on how there have been, like, a recent amount of cards which combine 2 keywords together, like Divine Shield Stealth. Or, yeah, this one also is another one of those combine 2 keywords together cards. By the way, I will say that I am a personal slight fan of putting, like, more keywords together, or even, like, more than 2, like, it could be 3. People have compared this to Argent Commander, and basically we halved all the stats, 3 mana, 2/1. This card turns out to be perfectly fine. Has a chance of being run constructed should there be a lot of 2 health minions out there. Current targets include cards such as Knife Juggler, and Sorcerer's Apprentice, and Mad Scientist. You can compare this with Wolf Rider, which is being run, and you lose 1 attack for Divine Shield. Cool. You can compare this with Scarlet Crusader, which was very, very fringely being run, even in recent times, and you lose 1 attack for Charge. I think there's a very real chance that this card replaces Wolf Rider in Hunter, just because, yeah, 3 damage is a lot, but usually the 3 damage would be removed shortly after. This is a pain to remove, and you can almost assume it'll attack, like, twice, far more likely than the Wolf Rider, in which case it'll deal 4 damage instead of 3. And then it also could be compared like it has a higher chance of attacking 3 times than the Wolf Rider attacking 2 times, in which case you're still getting 6, and you're getting 6 more likely. Another comparison that this card can actually be made to is, suppose Harvest Golem got charge. You charge the 3 mana 2/3 into some kind of 3/2, and then you get a 2/1. Argent Horserider does the same thing, except you can immediately kill the opponent's 3/2. So this is an elegant card, I think, and it's pretty good. In Arena, this is actually going to be a fairly good card because there are a lot of 3/2s in Arena. There's going to be a lot of times where an opponent plays a 3/2, and then you play the Argent Horserider and you kill their guy. Some people will comment on how 1 health is weak in Arena, and that's true. It is, but if they go turn 2, 3/2, you go turn 3, this thing, and attack and kill their guy, and then they go turn 4, hero power. Like, sometimes they don't have a 2-drop. Sometimes using the hero power is really awkward because, like, they wanted to play a 4-drop. And even if they do the perfect situation of using the hero power to deal 1 damage, if they're the class that can do that, and they have a 2-mana minion that they wanted to play, they still used 4 mana to deal with your 3-mana solution. It's one of those things that might subtly change things, such that a 2/3 might be better than a 3/2. Right now in Arena, it's still up for debate whether or not a 2/3 or a 3/2 is better, and this Argent Horserider just might be one small thing which tilts things more in favor of a 2/3. And I think it's been moving in that direction because Arena has gotten more aggressive, and there are more 2/1s out there which are actually played, so maybe we're going to see 2/3s rise, and Argent Horserider won't be that good, but it depends. This card is going to see some play because of Spellslinger. This card will also see some play because of Nexus Champion, Sarad. In Constructed, this card has no application. It turns out that Fireball is actually on its way out a little bit. Some decks from Mage actually don't run Fireball, notably Echo Mage or Control Mage, because 4 mana deal 6 damage is just not quite enough of an application. Yes, you kill most minions with it. Yes, it has the flexibility of going face, but it's not great when going face, and when you're dealing with a minion with it, it usually isn't that efficient. So adding 1 mana to deal with like a slightly more minions, yes, you can kill giants with it. Yes, you can kill most everything with it now, but it only hitting minions, that's not worth the extra 1 mana. It's not even worth the, well, okay, it would be worth the 1 extra mana if you could hit face with it. That would actually be incredibly powerful. But having it only hit minions, this thing could have cost 4. And then it would be an interesting card. I actually would like this card if it cost 4. It wouldn't even be a good card if it cost 4. Let's start with that. Because hard removal, which costs 4, we have Polymorph, which is arguably even better because you get the silence effects off, aren't really being run that much. Polymorph does make its way into some very heavy control decks. Like, this card could actually cost 3, and that would be really aggressively pushing a control agenda. But instead it costs 5. If it cost 4, I would probably be wiffle-waffling on, you know, you've got Polymorph, and now you've got Flame Lance. Flame Lance, you don't have to Fire Blast the sheep, but Polymorph, you get rid of some very annoying Death Rattle effects. It's kind of close. And then if it were costing 3 mana, I'd be like, oh, hey, they're pushing a control meta. That's pretty cool. But it costs 5. I cry every time. In Arena, this card will be good, though. Turns out that it's okay to pay 5 to deal with a minion when all of Arena is minion-based combat, and your fireballs will usually go for minions. This card will still be worse than Fireball in Arena by far, though. But yeah, in Arena, you sometimes have to deal with the random stuff like the War Golems and random Krakens, Boulder Fist Ogres. It's okay because you're actually dealing with them efficiently with Flame Lance. This lovely lady is the card art featured in the background of this card review, Darnassus Aspirant, and it's a good Druid card. You thought Wild Growth was good, now you've got Wild Growth, plus you get a free 2/3. That's a good card. That's an amazing card, actually. Part of the problem with Druids was that you couldn't always get the consistency of having either Wild Growth or Innervate in your hand. With Darnassus Aspirant, it might be good enough to run 2 Innervate, 2 Wild Growth, and 2 Darnassus Aspirant. And I like it because Druid has been weakening a little bit, and this pushes the flavor of Druid as a class that takes advantage of ramping up its mana. I think the card is fair also, because unlike Wild Growth, when you play it on turn 10, you don't get to just draw a card, so this card is a lot worse than Wild Growth in the super late game, since you can't just cycle the card. And this card also doesn't guarantee you that you're going to get a mana on the next turn. For example, sometimes Druids play Wild Growth on turn 7 because they want a Force of Nature Savage Row on turn 8. You play the Darnassus Aspirant then, and the opponent will just kill it if they're afraid of getting comboed. You could do like something such as turn 2 Darnassus Aspirant, turn 3 Keeper of the Grove, silence your Darnassus, but that's not really a good use of silence, I think. It's not quite worth it, unless your curve says so. But usually the opponent will have played something that you're going to want to Keeper for 2 damage, but it adds another option. This card is really good against aggro, because sometimes Wild Growth is too slow against aggro, and this card basically is a 2 mana 2/3 with taunt, and if you're playing against aggro, sometimes they're just going to have 2/1s and they can't actually deal with the Aspirant really efficiently, or they'll have to ruin their own curve in order to quick shot it, or to just use a direct damage card like Frostbolt instead of developing their board, just because the Aspirant is a threat. So this card can be considered better than 2 mana 2/3 taunt. Basically a minion which is so threatening that the opponent really wants to kill it is better than taunt because its effect is better than as if it had taunt. One of the weaknesses of Druid was to Mage because of Mirror Entity, and Darnassus Aspirant actually also helps that a bit, because you dare to copy my card? Here, have a Darnassus Aspirant. Here, have 1 less mana. One of the few ways to actively destroy an opponent's mana crystal. Kind of fun. There's some people who comment, oh hey, this nerfs Shredder a bit because then you don't gain the benefit and you get all the drawbacks. I think these cards are being printed with very little look on the concept of whether or not this nerfs or buffs Shredder. For example, Totem Golem is one of the best cards that you can get off of Shredder now. Anyways, in Arena, this card will also be quite good. Wrathguard, 2 mana 4/3. Man, I look at the stats and I'm like, yes, 2 mana 4/3. Drawback, whenever this minion takes damage, also deal that much to yourself. Those people who are shy about damage because they don't understand the concept of using life as a resource will be like, oh, I'm too scared to use this card, no. They might be the same people who think that Flame Imp is not so good, but turns out that Flame Imp is a great card. And Wrathguard, similarly, is also a great card. I love cards which give you some kind of drawback for more power, and Wrathguard is that card. It's also a demon, which might help with demon decks, which are almost at the cusp of having enough demons to actually be a deck. Hopefully there's more support for demons, other than Demonfuse, which is not really a demon support card, it's just a card that doesn't exist. You put this card into either an aggressive deck or a board control deck, because in a board control deck you just want stats, so that's basically 0, and you can also put this in a more aggressive version if you want to kill the opponent faster. The stats on this card encourage killing the opponent faster because 4 attack on 2 mana is very rare, and the health on 2 mana is standard 3, which means most other 2-drops do trade into it. That's a little bit unfortunate for the Wrathguard, but you can do so much damage to a minion with, say, like 4 or 5 health. Usually a minion with 4 health is on 3 mana, so if you play a 2 mana card and then you deal with a 3 mana card, which is going to usually be a 3/4, then you've gained a mana on your opponent, and that's a big deal. Yes, people are going to be afraid of the concept of playing this against a warrior, and then they shield slam this for like 30, and then you lose the game. or they're going to be afraid of getting flame lanced and then you take 8 damage. But realistically, I do think the Wrathguard is powerful enough and has similar enough comparison to Flame Imp that we'll see at least some experimental play. Probably one of the toughest cards to read, just because it's kind of tough without playing it to know how punished you will be for playing Wrathguard. But I, for one, will be happy to send my Wrathguard into a 5/5 and then Mortal Coil it. And 2 mana, 4/3, take 5 damage. Yes, that kind of stings. Why am I not playing Pit Lord then for 4 mana, 5/6? And then I'm like, oh, okay, maybe Wrathguard isn't that good, but it's one of the cards that's difficult to evaluate without seeing it in practice, and I am optimistic, I guess I'll say. And in the concept that you're up against the warrior with a bunch of armor, you've probably either lost already or you just simply won't play the Wrathguard until you've dealt more damage to the warrior. And hey, it's entirely possible that Wrathguard will deal you absolutely no damage throughout the course of the game if you control the board well enough. In Arena, I think this card will also be really good, because Arena is based off of stats, and this card has really good stats. It's 2 stats above average for the mana cost. How good Wrathguard will be does depend on basically how the meta shapes up to be. Some people are pointing out, oh, against Oil Rogue, you get the triple damage Blade Flurry. You do the usual weapon up, poison or oil, you hit the face, and then you Blade Flurry. So usually you get twice the amount of damage on your weapon because of Blade Flurry. Now you get 3 times the amount of damage. But against Rogue, the game plan was always to kill them as fast as possible as well. So playing the Wrathguard on turn 2 still actually might be very good against Rogue, since you're just trying to kill them quickly. Wrathguard, is the cost too high? Find out soon.